your teeth.
I
How dare
am not
you?
lying. I may be slandering though.
Slandering my good name.
Man, I even misspelt it yesterday, so that's even worse.
Oh my God, yes, he texted me yesterday, and Sundays is National Call Megan Day, and it's my favorite day of the week. And he texts me, he goes, "Is it National Call Megan Day?" But he forgets my H, my own father.
I did
The
not forget it.
betrayal.
I used text to speech at that moment. I was walking at the time, and apparently my phone does not know that the same Megan I'm texting is the Megan who has an H in her name. Um, Siri failed me. Please,
My
I've
feelings
seen you
are hurt.
misspell was.
Shut up.
I'm
That's
just saying.
irrelevant to the conversation.
So we are happy to have you join us for Georgia. As I was doing research on Georgia, first of all, Georgia factors strongly in the paranormal universe. And I was telling Megan that it was my opinion that Georgia was going to be like Rhode Island, where we took the smallest state in the union and spent 3 separate episodes on just that one state because there's so much of you know so many different stories, reports, and everything. Um, as a general rule, I'm the Bigfoot guy. Um,
Mhm.
in reality is I once had a student at this school I'm working at now who was like, Mr. Barber, what car do you drive? And another fourth grade student looked at him and just had this look on his face and says, you don't know which car is his. It's got like 5 Bigfoot, decals on the back of my Prius. So I'm a very um ecologically minded Bigfoot hunter. That's not really, not at all. I just bought the hybrid because I liked it.
I have a Prius too, so no worries. Mine's got all the anime stuff on it.
Don't
I well,
encourage this. Please don't encourage this.
yeah. Well, I did actually tell my wife at one point that I needed to get a bigger car if we're going to continue to do adventures that go outdoors and on off roads where a Prius has 3 inches of ground clearance and Arkansas has no paved roads. Um, but so Georgia as a state has over 140 um, Bigfoot sightings slash reports in the BFRO.net. And I know for a fact that, Megan and I talk about this a lot. There are, usually 1/10 of the actual numbers of reports, or excuse me, there's usually 1/10 of sightings are actually reported, because people are afraid of being labeled as crazy or losing jobs or whatever else
Not all
is.
we're embracing crazy.
Well, I mean, we are crazy, but that's a different story. Um, so being our Georgian friend, what have you heard? What's it like in Georgia?
For Bigfoot?
Or anything,
Anything
but
really.
Anything. I genuinely feel like a lot of people just kind of embrace it. I know me and Megan were talking about given the history of how the state was kind of created and just how it started out. It's just we're the weird state. We're the state where everything crazy happens and it's our history, it's what we are, and we just kind of embrace it. I know even in the town that I work in, there's a Bigfoot community here in town. So the town I live in, there's a Bigfoot community. So we're so much like such a wooded area. It's like everywhere you go, it's just forest and everyone's hunters and stuff like that. So everyone has stories somewhere here and there. And
that's very cool. I actually know that one of the earliest um report is in the right term, the story of the hairy man concept came out of Georgia, and it was a group of um I want to say it was during the Civil War era. Civil War soldiers were actually there was a small attack where one person was wounded, and they had killed apparently one of the creatures, and then they went back out with a group of soldiers to kill the monsters in the woods, and I think only one of them came back, if I remember correctly. Yes, Megan.
That's
How
so
may I help?
interesting, actually, that you. Well, I was gonna cut you off if you hit 11 or 12:25 without like a pause, but um, that's actually super interesting because when I was at Universal this weekend for the horror nights. One of the houses was Bigfoot. Like it was, and honestly, I will never look at Bigfoot again the same way because it was terrifying. Um, horrifying, truly. But the story that it was based off of was a group of hunters went into the wood and found a dead Bigfoot, and then the mama Bigfoot saw the hunters with the baby Bigfoot and then like attacked, and none of the hunters made it out again. And you're supposedly camping in the woods that night. But that's so interesting. I wonder if they had actually like based it on that story, because they could have just come up with that and it just coincidentally happens to align, but like that's cool.
No, I would say they probably based it on there. I was actually listening to Lynn Smith and the Bigfoot Project this weekend, and her Sunday release was all Georgian stories, two of which appear in the BFRO website in their database. And in fact, one of them is almost word for word off of the BFRO website. But the third story, which had to do with hog hunters, and this is a common theme, particularly in the Georgian stories, is there's hog hunters, they kill a bunch of hogs, and Bigfoot show up and take the bodies on them, and scare the bejesus right out of everybody in the thing. But there's also there's a very famous one. I'll have to look it up in just a second. That happened. The Mike Green, who was a Bigfoot researcher in Georgia, he actually had gotten thermal of a Bigfoot supposedly taking a Zagnut bar off of a stump in one of the state forests in Georgia. And when they try to recreate it, it appeared on Finding Bigfoot, their Georgian episode.
I remember this episode.
Well, they did, when they did the recreation, they're like, oh look, it was just a guy in a suit, because Bobo laying on the ground looked like the Bigfoot, which, I mean, that was his entire job on that show, was to look like Bigfoot anyways, which he did naturally. But the other side to that was, when you find out where the national forest is, it's 6 miles off of the main roads, and where the campsites are, it's not like Inks Lake State Park, where we've been in Texas, where it's campsite, then a little bit of road, then campsite. This is one of those ones that had primitive campsites, and he was at a primitive campsite, and there were no other campsites within 2 miles. So who in the hell is coming up on your campsite at 3 a.m. and stealing a Zagnut bar off of a stump in the middle of the night? I mean, that is one hell of a sense of munchies. Like, that is a lot of munchie going on right there. So anyways, I like Georgia.
If I'm lost enough, I would probably go steal a Zagnut bar off a stump. I'm not gonna lie. Like, it'd take some work to find one, but like I'll get there eventually. Sniff it out.
I know the last time my husband went camping with his friends, a bear stole all their breakfast in the middle of the night. Yeah, so it's very common. Like, we always, yeah, every time we go camping in the woods, there's some kind of animal that will definitely take everything.
Take your foods out.
You're gonna have to you have to like put everything in the tent with you. Or just
I'd rather have the bear take the food off the stump than try to get into the tent and take the food off of me.
I agree.
I have priorities. As long as the coffee's safe, everybody else will be.
It's very true. Coffee's safe, everybody's safe.
Actually, Dad, that's a shirt you need.
What?
You're not paying attention to us right now, but that's okay. We're saying as long as the coffee is safe on a camping trip, everybody else is safe. And I may get you that shirt for Christmas. That may be your Christmas present now.
Well, yeah. Actually, I was when we were at Pedernales Falls this weekend, there was a guy who was wearing my well, not mine, but the hide and seek champion of the world t-shirt, and I had almost worn that day, but your mom gets so embarrassed when I wear my Bigfoot t-shirts around, so I wore one yesterday, of course,
naturally, as one does. So You have told me many interesting things about the creation of Georgia cities, and now I really want to know more. And that cemetery. Because
Ooh.
I feel
The cemetery.
well, yeah, she's told me all about this really cool cemetery. And Dad, you'd think it's super interesting. And I think everybody else would find it super interesting. And if nobody else is, I'm interested in it. So, screw
Um,
y'all.
well, Bonaventure Cemetery is, if you guys have never seen Bonaventure Cemetery, it's the most gorgeous place on the planet. I got married there. I remember I was living with my husband at the time. And I, I remember I decided one day I'm getting married there, and I came home and I was like, listen, if you want to marry me, that's fine. This is the line. Like we're getting married in the cemetery. If you're not down for that, scooch on out. And he was like, I think I can handle that. And I'm like, okay, then we're good. And he actually he embraced it so much he actually proposed in the cemetery too, which like Georgia has a lot of really famous cemeteries, so it's actually really great. Oakland Cemetery in Atlanta is extremely famous. The lady that wrote Gone with the Wind is there. They do tours nonstop. It's definitely very haunted. It's absolutely gorgeous. That's where he proposed to me. But then we actually got married in Bonaventure Cemetery, and I have never actually took tours down there. But I knew I wanted to share Bonaventure Cemetery with you guys. So I started doing research about it, and I was telling Tom, I was like, this is so fitting, that I was kind of blown away with it. But um, in 1867, there was actually a guy named John Muir who spent 6 days in the cemetery sleeping when he was writing a story called A 1,000 Mile Walk to the Gulf. And he actually wrote a passage about Bonaventure Cemetery. And basically, to sum it up, he was like, Bonaventure is called a graveyard, a town of the dead, but the few graves are powerless in such a depth of life. The rippling of living waters, the song of birds, the joyous confidence of flowers, the calm, undisturbed grandeur of the oaks mark the place of graves as one of the Lord's most favored abodes of life and light. So, he talked about how living it is, despite it being covered in death. And so, I don't know. I've told Megan this before. I think when I told her I get married in the cemetery, she was like, "What?"
Well, you
but
didn't lead with that. You just said, "Oh yeah, I got married in the cemetery," and I was like, "What?"
one of the things that I always talk about is you never visit cemeteries just to see people you don't like. You only visit to remember the love and the happiness that you shared with the person that's there. And so, I don't know. I always just kind of look at them as happy places. The history of Bonaventure is very interesting, and I'm gonna kind of sum it up for you guys. But let's see. It's really interesting. It was built twice. During the 18th century, after the first building of it, the host actually had a really nice dinner party. They were actually known for very lavish dinner parties. Had a huge dinner party with everybody who was the who's who of Savannah was there. And there's massive river that runs right next to the cemetery or the property at the time. And in the middle of the dinner, the kitchen actually caught on fire, and the servants couldn't put it out. So the roof actually started caught on fire. It was hopeless. So one of the servants just actually kind of went to the owner and was like, "Hey, we can't stop this thing." And so he was like, "Okay, get everybody together. Hey guys, let's get our food, get our plates, let's collect our tables, and let's go outside into the garden and let's continue." Which is very welcome to Savannah, guys. I mean,
Party
that
has to go
is,
on.
yeah, the party's got to go on. And that is honestly the vibe of Savannah and the vibe of Georgia, 110%. We're just going to keep going. Let's do this. And that is 100% how we roll with everything that we do. let's just keep going. And so they went out into the garden, and they partied and they danced and they enjoyed their night, and they watched their mansion burn to the ground. And they threw their glasses up against the trees and they enjoyed themselves and they rebuilt their house. And a few years later, it burned down again and it didn't stop anything. And eventually, um, they donated it to the city because there were enough family members and enough people had kind of bought the land over and over again. And the city took it and turned it into a cemetery. The history, although it's so rich, it's so beautiful. There's so many famous people there. Johnny Mercer's there, famous singer. There's so many incredible stories. I could spend days alone on how many famous people are there alone. But there's one particular girl that is there. That is, her name's little Gracie. And she's a 5-year-old little girl. She was the daughter of a hotel owner, and she actually died of pneumonia, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, pneumonia, and she died at 5. And her parents eventually moved her and buried her elsewhere. But they moved, and but they left her alone in Bonaventure. But she has this most gorgeous statue. I've seen it, I photographed it hundreds of times. I have so many photographs of Gracie, and she's just so beautiful. It's a gorgeous little statue of this beautiful little girl. And it's interesting because, again, like I said, I'd never actually done the tours. You know, you do the tours of Savannah and all this other stuff. Never done it at Bonaventure because I always just kind of want to go and just relax. I go to Bonaventure, I read, I enjoy, I walk around. It just has this nice vibe of, hey, you're home. Hey, let's relax. Hey, let's have a party. Let's enjoy ourselves. Let's just enjoy the moment. Again, it's full of life. There's birds always chirping. There's butterflies everywhere. There are flowers that are perpetually always blooming. Johnny Mercer's grave always has flowers constantly blooming. And it's all these like crazy unique things that are very supernatural that you don't realize. For instance, Gracie is constantly heard throughout the cemetery laughing and giggling, and I've heard her voice laughing and giggling and didn't realize that that was a ghost. Me and my husband we've like made comments about like, do you hear a little girl just laughing and giggling? Like, do you see her? But there's so many like trees and there's so many lush gardens and there's so much forestry there that you just always assume that she's just right around the next corner, like behind the next little crypt or something like that. But it's always right around her little statue, and you're just like, oh, that's what it is, right? And then you also hear a lot of people partying. You also hear, again, that whole concept of they just kept going. They had that party, their laughter, the cheering. You hear the music, you hear the laughter, you hear the glass breaking, and you hear that in Bonaventure, and you really do. Like it's always this one thing. We always talked about how it's always this. It's one thing. Either it's quiet, it's calm, it's peaceful. We can sit down and read a book, and it's just the ultimate epitome of Southern grace, where you're just like chilling up underneath the oak tree and reading a book, and it's just quiet. Or you hear that Southern party everywhere you turn. Like you're just expected to walk into a party everywhere, and that is Bonaventure. And yeah, like I have heard the ghost. I have seen a lot of stuff in Savannah. I've seen a lot of stuff around here. I've seen a lot of stuff in my hometown as well. Georgia is just riddled with spirits everywhere you turn. This room is actually haunted.
You're like,
yeah. So I don't stay here at night. So yeah, it's just, Georgia's crazy. It's full of, I don't know. Like I said, we just kind of embraced what we were here for and how we were established, and this is our legacy.
So one of my
I mean,
favorite ghost stories actually comes out of Georgia. It's a story, not a it's not based in truth. It's a short story. But as you were talking about the little girl laughter, it kind of popped it up into my head, and I was like, oh, that's right. That story is actually from Georgia. It was a Savannah area mansion story where, little boy kind of coming of age, sees a picture of a little girl, goes out and he's staying at his grandma's.
oh, I hate this
uh,
story. Please stop. Freaks me
and
the hell out.
the long and short is he meets a girl in the back garden and
Goes through the hedge,
eventually
right?
finds out that the little girl is actually the is spitting image of the girl in the painting, and he falls in love with this girl in the picture, and she decides to leave him a token of her love for him, and she ties the little ribbon that she had around her neck or on the swing for him to find, and then when he goes in, he sees the painting, but the painting's now missing its kerchief. And so it's one of my all-time favorite short stories, but it takes place in Georgia. Yeah, Georgia and ghost stories are not exactly misaligned there. I guess being Savannah and having 7 or 8 haunted cemeteries will do that to you every time. Megan and I in our family, we went to Atlanta once winter, I guess it was.
Over
And
Christmas, I think.
yeah, it was over Christmas. And again, when you're walking the streets of Atlanta, if you're at all empathic in any way, shape, or form, the hairs on the back of your neck are just bristling the entire time, because you're just like, there's something going on. It's kind of like the same vibe I get when I go to New Orleans. New Orleans is a no-go at night for me, because it kind of gives me that feeling. Kind of
We
like,
didn't spend much time in Atlanta, though, to be fair. Like, we were there for maybe 24 hours. Mom wanted to go to the aquarium.
we were there for two
Oh,
days. Yeah,
Were
we
we?
had yeah, we were
I
there.
don't remember that. Blocked it
It,
out.
it was, yeah,
Sheer
well,
memory loss.
it's because of the aquarium.
that's all you remember.
I remember the
We
aquarium.
had a
Well, there was a
very
couple of
unfortunate
the aquarium.
experience with the
Yes,
aquarium and the
yes, we
beluga
did.
whales.
We did. Yes,
Oh
specifically.
no.
Oh, traumatizing.
Traumatizing.
Traumatizing. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. They still
But
make fun of me for this years later. I'm not going to tell the story. I'll tell it to you later. But like,
yeah, it has nothing to do with
not
hauntings,
for public consumption.
although it might
It
haunt
has
our
nothing to do
memories
with politics.
forever.
It will. It surely will.
So
I've tried to print for years.
Going back to my large hairy friend, a lot of the stories of Bigfoot actually come out of the Fort Stewart area of Georgia, and apparently the main thought behind it is because it's largely guarded. They've had an opportunity to breed, raise their families. And then again around the Appalachian Trail where it trails off in Georgia. And in fact, my brother, the closest thing he's ever saying to like, oh, there's something in the woods was when he was walking the Appalachian Trail down between the Carolinas and Georgia, because he was just like, um, it didn't sound like a bear was his concept. Now, I also have to set that up and say that my brother does these hikes with no protection. The most that he might have on him is a 3-inch folding knife. So the fact that he's made it to 59 has been nothing shy of a miracle. But one of the ones that
into a river with alligators.
yes,
Oh,
one of the
geez.
ones that I really liked the best coming out of Georgia was a military person who actually went on record, which is unusual. It happened outside of Fort Stewart in 1998. He was an evening commander. He was a night shift commander and working patrol. And when they work patrol on the outside of Fort Stewart, I don't know what they do at Fort Stewart, but they have some serious patrolling going on where they're driving Humvees with gunners. So, I don't know what's happening. 2 a.m. Vehicle moving solo around the dirt road. There's the tank trails. Comes across and sees something in the thermal. The thermal is pretty clear. It's 10 to 12 yards in front of him, and says, they could clearly make out the side of the road, the trees, everything. Could make out the road sign. When the figure crossed in front of the road sign, it was bigger and taller than the road sign would be, which would be anywhere from 10 to 12 feet in the air. So very large. Cleared the road in 3 steps at normal stride, just walking, not running, and went and re-entered the vegetation. Would have been nice if it ended there, but unfortunately, because these are soldiers, they stopped to look around, and it started yelling and howling from the bushes out at them and shaking the trees. One of the trees, they got out and later found it, and they measured its diameter at being over 2 feet. So this thing was shaking a 30-foot plus high tree with a 2-foot diameter and yelling. And at that point, the gunner decided that it was time to leave, because he wasn't entirely certain that the guns they had on the Humvee would stop an attack if it decided to attack. This witness also went on to say that reports on the Fort Stewart area are not encouraged by the commanding officers, but they're well known. There's another very famous one that happened where a different person later, 2010, 2011, was checking on the ammunition dump that is part of Fort Stewart, and it had been broken into, and he was charged, and he saw it full daylight. He went to go make a report, and he ended up leaving the military because of it, because he couldn't sleep anymore. So very interesting. But again, as you said, Kristen, Georgia is largely forested. It is, I think, the 4th or 5th most forested state in the country. Maine, Alaska, North Carolina, Georgia. So I guess it's 4th. So gives rise to the hairy man.
I actually didn't know it was like that close to being the top forested, which is kind of cool though. I will say that I do love everywhere you go, you do have these like woods.
I like the trees. I get sad in Texas because they don't have proper trees. Sorry, Texas, all of your trees are invalid.
There are parts. The piney woods have some decent trees. Oh
no.
Yeah, I know. The ticker has come. The thing with Texas, I mean, because Texas will be at least 20 episodes. I mean, it's just giant. That's the problem with Texas. The thing about Georgia that I always find interesting, if you talk to people from the Northeast, Georgia is a tiny little state. And the reason it's a tiny little state, when you're from Rhode Island and you call another state tiny, you're just talking about your own deficiencies in life. All right. But the reason why people from the Northeast think that it's tiny is because they only drive in it on their way to Florida, and it don't, 95 only crosses on a catty corner. Georgia, it's only maybe 101 miles or something along those lines. But Georgia itself, I made the mistake driving through Georgia, like all the way through Georgia one time, and I was like, holy crap, this is a big state. And unless you're in one of the major cities, it's a small town, rural.
Yeah, unless you're like in Atlanta or around that hub, there's nothing. You're talking about like 5 hours of nothing,
which in my world is perfect. That's what I love. It's true, you know that.
Well, I'm not. I didn't say anything. I wasn't for or against.
We are actually a train state, so we have built our whole state around the production of the train and the movement of the train.
I was gonna say, all of our, you had mentioned that.
Yeah, all of our Atlanta was built that way. We're not around waterways. And all of our towns are like that too. So
I wonder if the unique way that the towns were built and like the sections that it was built around contributed to the amount of ghosties that seem to be
sure. I'm sure, because towns went up fast and then they would break down fast.
Right.
Yeah.
So you get like that strong, like imprint, and then it's like poof, goodbye.
Yeah.
So
my hometown, which is Tallapoosa, Georgia, has a ghost tour now. So I was gonna plug in my hometown. But we are actually home to the oldest and very first school in the
really,
state. Yeah. And we have 5 that were built on the same property on Robinson Avenue. And we have over 5 or 6 ghosts that are just there alone.
just chilling.
Just chilling from the from the different schools and stuff. I think I can share some of the photos with you guys. Okay, well, I have some photos I can share with you guys later. But
We'll put them in the
when
overlay.
one boy, they were practicing a fire drill and they scared him to death. Like literally, he was just kind of a sick little kid and he got scared to death and he collapsed and they can still see him. And one girl haunts the old gym, and then there's an old janitor that does it as well. So it's really interesting. Like our hometown, like my uncle's house is haunted. And so growing up and hearing the stories of how him and his sister and his brother like all grew up with this ghost just randomly showing up, and they just like lived with it and just, hey, it was just the ghost in the house kind of thing. It was just normal for them to kind of live. And it's funny too because I sent you the video and hopefully we can kind of add it in somewhere because they told us that we could share it. But I sent you the video of the swings just swinging back and forth, and I had thought it
Oh,
was
that
at one of the,
sounds familiar.
yeah, I
Yeah.
thought it was at one of the old schools, and apparently it was at one of the churches, and I was like, oh, I grew up seeing it happen a lot at one of the schools. And she was like, no, it's at one of the churches, but it does happen at the school a lot too. And I was like, oh,
Well, I mean,
no,
ghosts
yeah,
need to play too. They need their little playtime.
right.
That's
The kids
fine.
deserve it.
Yeah.
So
We
we have a lot of interesting things in our little hometown too.
well,
Yeah,
I
I'll
mean, I
send
think
it to
it
you.
sounds like Georgia's a lot like New England. You know, it's an older state. It seems to have a lot of different stories happening. But I think it's also a cultural thing. You know, up in New England, a lot of people believe in ghosts, and therefore, when they see something, they don't immediately say, "Oh, it was the wind. Oh, it was this. Oh, it was that." It was, you know, you know, Megan's grandmother's house when she was a little girl was way haunted. And you know, when we would go there, if something happened, you just knew that's what it was. You didn't have to make an excuse for it. And the same is true with like Connecticut Point with the swings, actually, which is kind of a thing that you're talking about swings. There's a very famous
I
one in
will
Rhode Island.
I will argue that her swings were slightly creepier because at least at the point swings they were kind of doing like a twofer situation, and
Mhm.
this one literally like one singular swing was swinging, and it wasn't like lightly going back and forth. No, it was like full on
I
Oh
can't
yeah,
wait to see the
you
video.
play this one. Yeah.
like child trying to like go as high as they can and like jump off type swinging. Like it was not like
So an
little.
adventurous ghost.
Yes, yes, it was an adrenaline junkie ghost. That's what I have personally determined. Like it was yeah, no, there were some interesting swing sets happening there. Well, Georgia sounds a little scary. I'm not gonna lie to you. Like,
I nothing I have heard would keep me away from Georgia.
no, I would go visit, but like they'd be a little scared.
Well, yeah, but I mean, we can scare each other just walking in the woods as a general rule. Of course, when you have like creepy dead deers hanging out of the trees where there are no pumas, you
Or
know,
albino deers emerging from the mists at night. Like what the hell?
I just wanted to hear not Misty Moisty Morning, the Misty Morning Valley, the song from Lord of the Rings when that happened. But you know, they just did not coordinate it for me. Very upsetting.
Damn ghosts.
Well, we are
Anything.
quickly on our countdown. Kristen, thank you
Wait,
so much for joining us. Oh, wait, Megan has something to add.
I do. We need to talk about Kristen's book.
Oh, yes.
I have
It is New England and Witches. Okay, you knew which book I was referencing, though.
I have a new book coming out called Jingle Bells and Ghostly Tales. It's the second book to Thick Thighs and Witchy Vibes. So it's a Christmas book. It should be coming
New
out
England.
soon. So
Excellent.
yeah.
I presume you won't get upset if we put a link in for people to click on and find you. Yes. This was fun. I really enjoyed getting context on Georgia. You know, usually it's just us looking at research and coming through and combing through story after story after story. But to hear firsthand and actually to know that there's a haunted house in your family makes, you know, it makes you family. Because you know, that's a thing in our lives that we have to deal with. We actually had one incident in the house that Megan grew up in as a little girl, not her grandmother's house, where I was working in the house. We had purchased the house. We owned it for about 6 months before we actually moved into it. And when I clear as a bell heard and saw a little girl laughing and running through the kitchen. And at the time, Megan would have been about just under a year, maybe 11 months old, 10 months old. But she also wasn't present. That was the thing.
I also was not.
At the time we were living at my mother-in-law's haunted house. And I actually stopped and I asked, like I yelled out for my wife, wondering if she had just come in and I didn't hear her and she was coming to visit me because it was pretty late at night. And, you know, obviously she wasn't there. So I called her and I said, did you come by the house? And she's like, you're crazy. And I said, listen up, this is what happened. So the little girl laughing in the graveyard is just like the hackles on the back of my neck are like, so, all right. We are down to less than a minute. We are very excited to have you. Hopefully we will get to join with you again sometime in the future. Yeah. I love to hear stories. Megan and I have a goodbye ritual, so you have to forgive us as we do. Bye, everybody. All right. Thank you so much for joining us. We will talk to you again soon.
All right. See you guys.
See you.